The divorce papers felt heavy in my hands as I sat in the courthouse hallway, wondering how 15 years of marriage could be reduced to a stack of cold legal documents. My soon-to-be ex-husband, Daniel Harrison, stood across the marble floor, laughing with his lawyer about something probably at my expense. He looked exactly like the wealthy banker he was. Expensive suit, perfect hair, and that smug smile that had once charmed me, but now made my stomach turn. I'm Olivia Wright, though for the past 15 years I've been Olivia Harrison, the perfect banker's wife. I gave up my own career in finance to support his, hosted the right parties, joined the right clubs, and smiled at all the right moments. That's what was expected when you married into the Harrison banking dynasty. Mrs. Harrison, my lawyer, Samantha Porter, touched my arm gently. They're ready for us. It's Ms. Wright now. I corrected her, standing up and straightening my simple navy dress. Time to reclaim my name. Inside the courtroom, Daniel's arrogance filled the space like expensive cologne. He'd fought this divorce every step of the way, not because he wanted to save our marriage, but because he couldn't stand the idea of me leaving him. Control was everything to Daniel Harrison. Your Honor, his lawyer began, my client has been more than generous in the settlement offer. Mrs. Harrison. Ms. Wright, I interrupted quietly. Daniel's jaw tightened. He hated being corrected. Ms. Wright, his lawyer continued, would retain the summer house in the Hamptons and a very comfortable monthly allowance. An allowance? I couldn't help but laugh. Like I'm a child. Well, you'll need something to live on, Daniel spoke up, his voice dripping with condescension. It's not like you've worked in 15 years. Someone has to take care of you. The judge looked between us, clearly sensing the tension. Ms. Wright, you're declining the settlement offer? Yes, Your Honor. I don't want his houses or his allowance. I just want what I brought into this marriage and my freedom. Daniel actually laughed out loud. What you brought in? You had nothing when we met. Everything you are is because of me. I met his eyes steadily. Then I guess I have nothing to lose. The next hour was a blur of legal terms and asset divisions. In the end, I walked away with my personal savings, my car, and my education, an MBA from Wharton that Daniel loved to pretend didn't exist. He kept the houses, the boats, the country club memberships, and his precious family name. As we left the courtroom, Daniel caught my arm. You're making a mistake, Olivia. You really think you can make it out there? The world's changed since you played at being a banker. I pulled my arm away. I guess we'll find out. Good luck surviving without my money, he called after me, loud enough for everyone to hear. You'll be back within a year, begging for that allowance. I didn't turn around. I didn't give him the satisfaction of a response. Instead, I walked straight out of that courthouse into the bright spring morning, got into my car, a modest Audi I'd bought with my own savings, and drove to the small apartment I'd rented in the unfashionable part of town. The apartment was a far cry from his mansion in Greenwich. 1 bedroom, basic furniture, and a view of the neighboring building's brick wall. But it was mine. And for the first time in 15 years, I could breathe. I opened my laptop and pulled up an email I'd received 2 weeks ago, one I hadn't dared respond to while the divorce was pending. It was from Janet Monroe, my old mentor from my banking days. Olivia, heard about the divorce. Time to get back in the game. The industry needs sharp minds who understand both sides of the desk. Let's talk when you're ready. The door's always open. Janet had gone on to become CEO of Atlantic Regional Bank, a smaller but rapidly growing institution that was giving the bigger banks, including Harrison Financial, some serious competition. She'd offered me a job right before I married Daniel, but I turned it down. He'd insisted that no wife of his would work in banking. It would look desperate, he'd said. I started typing my response, then stopped. Picked up my phone instead. Janet, it's Olivia Wright. Are you free for coffee tomorrow? Her laugh was warm and familiar. Finally ditched the deadweight? Meet me at Lorenzo's, 9 a.m. And Olivia? Bring your A game. Things are about to get interesting. That night, I dug through boxes until I found what I was looking for. My old banking certification files, financial analysis portfolios, and most importantly, a thumb drive containing research I'd done years ago on emerging market risk assessment. Daniel had laughed at my little project back then. He wouldn't be laughing soon. My phone buzzed with a text from my sister Kate. Saw the divorce announcement in the society pages. Daniel's people made it sound like you had a mental breakdown. You okay? I smiled, thinking about Janet's email and the plans already forming in my mind. Better than okay, I replied. I'm free. Another text came through, this one from Daniel. The country club called about your membership. Told them you wouldn't be needing it anymore. Enjoy the public parks. I deleted it without responding and went back to updating my resume. Let him think he'd won. Let him believe I was finished. Because while Daniel Harrison was busy playing king of his little banking empire, I was about to remind everyone who I was before I became his wife. And this time, I wouldn't be playing by his rules. I stayed up late into the night, reviewing banking regulations that had changed during my retirement, studying market trends, and drafting proposals based on my old research. By the time I finally went to bed, my small apartment was covered in notes and printouts, and my mind was racing with possibilities. Tomorrow, I would meet Janet and take the first step toward reclaiming not just my career, but my identity. Daniel thought he'd kept me in a gilded cage for 15 years, but he'd forgotten something crucial. Caged birds don't forget how to fly. They just wait for the right moment to spread their wings. And my moment was about to begin. Lorenzo's coffee shop looked exactly as I remembered it from my banking days. Worn leather chairs, brass fixtures, and the kind of quiet sophistication that old money tries so hard to imitate. Janet Monroe sat in her usual corner booth, reading the Wall Street Journal with a half-empty espresso in front of her. She looked up as I approached, her sharp eyes taking in everything: my simple but elegant outfit, my straight posture, my lack of the designer accessories I'd worn as Mrs. Harrison. You look better, she said simply. Marriage never suited you, Olivia. Banking did. I slid into the booth. I'm ready to prove that. Janet folded her newspaper carefully. Are you? Because the position I'm thinking of isn't entry level. It's not even middle management. I need someone to head up our entire risk assessment division. I felt my heart skip, but kept my face neutral. That's a big job. Huge, she agreed. The kind of position Daniel Harrison would kill to influence. We're expanding aggressively, moving into territories his bank considers their divine right to control. She paused, studying me. Of course, having his ex-wife in charge of approving multi-million-dollar loans might create some interesting situations. I met her gaze steadily. I know every trick in his playbook, Janet. Every shortcut, every handshake deal, every way he bends the rules without quite breaking them. Exactly why I want you. She pulled out a folder. Your starting salary would be twice what Harrison Financial pays their division heads. Full benefits, stock options, and complete autonomy in building your team. I opened the folder, scanned the terms. The numbers made me blink. One condition, Janet added. You start Monday. We have major deals pending, and I need someone who can hit the ground running. I'll need to review the current regulatory framework, update my certifications. Already arranged. Your credentials are still valid, and I've got you registered for the updated certification exams next month. She smiled. I've been planning this since I heard about your divorce filing 6 months ago. I felt a laugh bubble up. You always were 3 steps ahead. I learned that from you, actually. Remember the Miller account? I did. It was the last major deal I'd worked on before meeting Daniel. Everyone said it was too risky. But I'd seen something others missed. The loan saved the company and made the bank millions. Speaking of the Miller account, Janet continued casually. Guess who's been sniffing around for a major loan? Harrison Financial. I froze. Daniel's bank needs a loan. They're over-leveraged on some aggressive expansions. Need to shore up their capital reserves before the Fed's next audit. They've been shopping around quietly, but word gets out. She sipped her espresso. The application will probably cross your desk sometime next quarter. The implications hit me like a wave. Daniel's bank, having to come to us for help? To me for approval? You planned this whole thing, I said slowly. Janet's smile was razor sharp. I plan to hire the best risk assessment officer in the business. The fact that it might make your ex-husband squirm? That's just a bonus. I signed the contract right there at the coffee shop. The next few weeks passed in a blur of activity. My small apartment became command central as I rebuilt my professional life. The walls were covered in market analysis printouts, regulatory updates, and competitor profiles. I worked 18-hour days, refreshing knowledge that had lain dormant but never disappeared. My team came together quickly, sharp young analysts who cared more about competence than connections. I poached a few from the big banks, including Harrison Financial, not because of spite, but because I knew talent when I saw it. Word spread fast in banking circles. The ex-Mrs. Harrison wasn't just working again. She was becoming a force to be reckoned with. Atlantic Regional's approval rates were impeccable, our risk assessments thorough and innovative. My old research on emerging markets proved revolutionary when combined with current data analytics. Then came the morning I'd been anticipating. Maria, my assistant, placed a thick folder on my desk. Loan application from Harrison Financial, she said quietly. They're requesting an urgent review. I opened the file and felt a grim satisfaction. The numbers confirmed what Janet had hinted at. Daniel's bank had overextended, making risky bets that looked good on quarterly reports but created dangerous exposure. Now they needed a lifeline, and we were one of the few banks strong enough to provide it. My phone buzzed. A text from Kate. Just ran into Daniel at Le Bernardin. He looked stressed. Something about federal audits? I smiled and typed back. How interesting. By the way, having a little party next week. Professional celebration. Want to come? Wouldn't miss it. Upper East Side crowd still thinks you're living on ramen noodles. Can't wait to see their faces. I was reviewing the loan documents when Jan appeared in my doorway. They're getting desperate, she said. Their CFO called twice this morning. Let them sweat, I replied, not looking up from the papers. Their quarterly filing is due in 3 weeks. That's when things get really interesting. You found something in their application. I pointed to a series of numbers. They've been playing shell games with their asset valuations. Legal, technically, but very aggressive. The kind of thing that makes federal regulators nervous. Janet whistled softly. And with the new banking regulations, exactly. They either get this loan to shore up their positions, or they face some very uncomfortable questions from the Fed. What are you thinking? I closed the file carefully. I'm thinking it's time to schedule an in-person meeting. Applicants of this size deserve personal attention. Janet's smile was predatory. Want me to make the call? No, I said, picking up my phone. This one, I want to handle myself. I dialed Harrison Financial's main number, which I still knew by heart. Risk Assessment Division, please. Yes, I'll hold. This is Olivia Wright, Head of Risk Assessment at Atlantic Regional. We've reviewed your loan application and need to schedule an in-person meeting with your executive team. Yes, it's urgent. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. works perfectly. And please make sure Mr. Harrison attends. As CEO, we'll need his personal guarantees. I hung up and caught Janet watching me with admiration. You've been waiting for this, haven't you? 2 years, I admitted. Ever since he laughed in that courtroom. She nodded. Just remember, this isn't about revenge. No, I agreed, standing to gather my files. It's about justice. And proper risk assessment, of course. That evening, I stayed late at the office, preparing for tomorrow's meeting. I had my team pull every piece of data on Harrison Financial's operations, every market analysis, every potential weakness. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Daniel. Heard you're playing banker again. Cute. Try not to embarrass yourself tomorrow. I didn't respond. Instead, I pulled up the latest Federal Reserve guidelines on banking capitalization requirements and smiled. Tomorrow would be interesting indeed. Because while Daniel had spent 2 years believing I was finished, I'd spent that time becoming exactly what he feared most. A woman who understood not just banking, but power. And tomorrow, he would walk into my office and finally understand what that meant. At precisely 1:45 p.m., Maria's voice came through the intercom. Harrison Financial's executive team has arrived. They're in the main conference room. I took one last look in my office bathroom mirror, adjusting my crimson channel blazer, the first luxury purchase I'd made with my own money since the divorce. My reflection showed exactly what I wanted it to: power, confidence, and not a trace of the demure banker's wife I used to be. Tell them I'll be there in 10 minutes, I replied, gathering my files. Let them wait. Daniel Harrison had kept me waiting for 15 years. Through the glass walls, I could see them getting nervous. Daniel paced the conference room, checking his watch every 30 seconds. His CFO, Maxwell Peters, kept adjusting his tie. 3 other executives I didn't recognize sat stiffly in their chairs, probably wondering why they'd been summoned to a smaller bank for what should have been a routine loan approval. At exactly 1:55 p.m., I walked in. Daniel's face went through a fascinating series of expressions: shock, anger, disbelief, and finally, a poorly concealed attempt at condescension. Olivia, he managed, trying to sound amused. This is unexpected. Ms. Wright, I corrected him smoothly, taking my seat at the head of the table. Shall we begin? Maxwell Peters cleared his throat. Perhaps we should wait for the department head. You're looking at her, I interrupted, opening the first file. Now, about your loan application. Daniel's laugh was sharp, forced. This is ridiculous. We're seeking a $100 million credit facility. Surely the actual head of risk assessment is speaking. Janet's voice cut in as she entered the room. I suggest you listen carefully, Mr. Harrison. Your quarterly filing deadline is approaching, isn't it? The color drained from Daniel's face as reality finally sank in. He wasn't just facing his ex-wife. He was facing the person who held his bank's future in her hands. I started my presentation, methodically laying out every flaw in their loan application, every questionable asset valuation, every regulatory red flag. Years of watching Daniel operate had taught me exactly where to look. Your Midwest expansion was particularly aggressive, I noted, pulling up a chart. 3 bank acquisitions in 6 months, all heavily leveraged. The Fed's new capitalization requirements must be keeping you up at night. Maxwell Peters shifted uncomfortably. We've maintained all required ratios. Through some creative accounting, I finished for him. Legal? Technically, but precarious. 1 bad quarter, 1 regulatory review, and the whole house of cards collapses. This is absurd, Daniel snapped, standing up. We'll take our business elsewhere. Will you? I asked quietly. Before the end of the quarter? We both know every other bank in the region has already turned you down. That's why you're here. Janet smiled from her corner. Sit down, Mr. Harrison. Ms. Wright isn't finished. I pulled out another document, the final nail in the coffin. Your latest internal audit. Interesting reading. I particularly enjoyed the section on risk exposure in your Asian markets. Daniel's face went from red to white. How did you get that? I believe you know Thomas Chen, the analyst you fired last month for raising unnecessary concerns about your exposure rates. He works for me now. The room went deadly quiet. Everyone knew what this meant. Without this loan, Harrison Financial would face a Federal Reserve audit they couldn't pass. Daniel's empire would crumble. What do you want? He asked, his voice barely controlled. I closed my files slowly. Want? I'm just doing my job, Daniel, assessing risk, making sound financial decisions. Isn't that what you always said banking was about? Name your terms. Maxwell interrupted, shooting Daniel a warning look. I laid out the conditions. Atlantic Regional would provide the loan, but with strict oversight provisions. Harrison Financial would need to unwind its riskier positions, submit to quarterly external audits, and most importantly, restructure its board of directors to include independent members. You're trying to take control of my bank, Daniel realized, his voice hollow. No, I corrected him. I'm trying to save it from your ego. You have 24 hours to accept these terms. After that, I'm obligated to share my concerns with the Federal Reserve. The next hour was a blur of technical discussions, terms, conditions. Daniel sat in silence, watching his authority slip away with each passing minute. By the time the meeting ended, Maxwell Peters and the other executives were treating me with a deference that would have been unimaginable 2 years ago. As they filed out, Daniel lingered. You planned this, he said quietly. All of it. No, Daniel, you did this to yourself. I just happened to be in the right position to catch you. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I made you who you are. That's where you're wrong, I replied, gathering my papers. I was always this person. You just never bothered to notice. After they left, Janet appeared in my office with 2 glasses of champagne. That, she said, was masterful. I took a glass, watching through the window as Daniel's team hurried to their waiting cars. It's not over yet. No, she agreed. But phase 1 is complete. Ready for what comes next? I smiled, thinking of the changes coming to Harrison Financial, the opportunities opening up in the industry, the looks on all those society faces when they realized who I'd become. Absolutely. The next few months transformed everything. Harrison Financial accepted our terms. They had no choice. The story sent shockwaves through the banking industry. The ex-wife, who went from trophy to kingmaker in 2 years, became legend in financial circles. Daniel was forced to step down as CEO 6 months later, after the independent board members discovered even more problems with his leadership. Last I heard, he was consulting in Dubai. Far from the New York banking world he once ruled. I kept my position at Atlantic Regional, but now with expanded responsibilities. Janet and I were revolutionizing how regional banks operated, creating a new model of ethical, sustainable growth. 1 year to the day after that fateful meeting, I received a letter from Daniel's sister, Catherine. We'd been close once, before the divorce. "I never thought I'd say this," she wrote, "but you did him a favor. The bank's stronger now than it ever was under his control. He just couldn't see past his own ego to recognize what he had in you." I folded the letter and looked around my corner office. So different from the small apartment where I'd started my comeback. On my desk sat a new photo. Me ringing the opening bell at the stock exchange. Janet beside me, celebrating Atlantic Regional's record-breaking quarter. My phone buzzed. A message from Kate. Guess who I just saw at Le Bernardin? Daniel's ex-girlfriend, the one he left you for. She was having lunch with her new husband, a junior analyst at your bank. I laughed out loud. Life had a way of coming full circle. That evening, I gave a speech at the Women in Banking conference. Looking out at the sea of faces, many of them women who'd been dismissed, underestimated, or pushed aside. I shared my story. Not to gloat, but to show them what was possible. Success, I told them, isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. Later at the reception, a young analyst approached me. "Ms. Wright? I'm in a similar situation. My boss keeps taking credit for my work, telling me to be patient, paying my dues." I handed her my card. "Come see me Monday. Atlantic Regional is always looking for talent." She looked at the card like it was gold. "Thank you. You know, you've become something of a legend in banking circles." I smiled, thinking of that day in the courthouse when Daniel laughed at my chances of survival. "The thing about legends," I said, "is that they usually start with someone being underestimated." As I drove home that night, past the glittering towers of Manhattan's financial district, I thought about how far I'd come. Not just in terms of success, but in understanding my own worth. Daniel had been right about one thing. I wouldn't survive without his money. I would thrive without it. Because in the end, the best revenge wasn't taking his bank or exposing his failures. It was becoming the person I was always meant to be, the person he tried so hard to keep contained. And that person? She was just getting started. When the Wall Street Journal ran their annual Women in Finance issue the following month, my story was the cover feature. The headline read, "The Queen of Regional Banking: How Olivia Wright Transformed an Industry." Daniel sent a copy to my office, a yellow sticky note attached. "Congratulations. You proved me wrong." I added the magazine to my wall of achievements, right next to the original divorce papers. Together, they told a story, not just of revenge or redemption, but of reclamation. Because sometimes the biggest power move isn't taking someone else's throne. It's building your own kingdom.